I am Pracukowski, Director of at iGaming Cap, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. And before we begin, I really wanted to thank the organizers of Casual Connect for inviting me to moderate this panel and also develop the concept for this session. It's my first Casual Connect show, and I have to tell you, it's far exceeded my expectations because being in the gaming industry, we go to shows such as G2E located in Las Vegas. But here, it's kind of outside of our element, and I met a lot of new people, a lot of new technology, so it's a very exciting show, so hopefully I'll be invited back next year. But again, show me the content. I wanted to say show me the money, but it is show me the content. I figured we could provide a session where, for content developers, you could actually hear from our industry leaders, and they can articulate what they want in new content for social, real money platforms, and of course, we can't really leave content from the casino floor off as well. But before we begin, we really kind of need to review the content and its impact on the casino industry. And if you look at this picture, it's the first slot machine invented somewhere between 1887 and 1895. It's called a Liberty Bell. Again, is a thing, this is from Wikipedia. I know how accurate Wikipedia is, but I'm just letting you know that's where this information came from. But then, you look at the next slot machine, which has matured over the years. So you fast forward 120 some odd years later, and we see this. It's a three-dimensional slot machine. Wherever you sit, you actually can see the 3D effects without wearing those clunky glasses. And the interesting thing is that seat has total surround sound. But if you're in the casino industry, you know we really haven't seen that much innovation evolve over the years. We've seen innovation on the slot machines, but if you look at the casino industry, they're really slow to adopt. I mean, if you really think about it, the last major innovation on the casino floor that was widely accepted in the industry was what you see here. It's called ticket in, ticket out, or in the industry call it TITO. And that was implemented around 2001, 2002. Think about that. That was 15 years ago. Now, what other new technology has been widely adopted by the casino industry? And again, I say widely, since TITO, nothing, zero. Nothing's been widely adopted in the industry. So it's kind of sad to see the rest of the world leapfrog, but you look on the technology on the casino floor, it's over 15 years old. But what have casinos done? And I say some casinos. They slowly began implementing social casino platforms. What they're using them for is to not only sell virtual currency, but it helps them expand their brand online and drive consumers back to their property. And then you look at the real money internet gaming sites. And this is a plug for Brett because both those slides came from his company, from Paula Interactive. You know, we have 3 states right now that have legalized internet gaming. Not full casino other than New Jersey, but they are slow to adopt. So hopefully we'll see some more legalization in the future, but one never knows. So as a content developer, you also have to think about regulators. And regulators can be a big hurdle in the industry when you're developing content. And I would have to say that the hurdle for developing content has really been, the bar has been lowered because now the regulators are actually reaching out to the industry, the content providers, the slot manufacturers, anyone, even you in the audience here, you know, develop something new. We're clamoring for something new on the casino floor that'll be widely accepted across the US. So to say that the regulators are a barrier, they're not. And this is the first case right here where they, approved the first skill-based slot machines that are in Atlantic City and also in Nevada as well. So, some of this is a little background about the industry, so I thought we would, we have an exciting panel today. We actually have 3 different individuals from 3 different areas of the industry, and I think they have a lot of insight and a lot of information that I really want you to be able to gain from this session. So let's start with Melissa Blau. She's the director of iGaming Capital. If you could introduce yourself, who is iGaming Capital, and what's your background in the industry?
Okay, thank you. I didn't really introduce myself yesterday on the panel, but I've been in the online gaming industry for about 17 years, and mainly as an operator of real money operations in Europe, out of the UK. I operated a casino that was based out of Gibraltar, sold to GTech, and then I operated a series of sports betting properties, mainly affiliates and operators, small sports betting properties. And then I launched a live dealer casino in the UK before moving over to the US in about 2011 and advising gaming operators and suppliers here in the US, trying to basically export my knowledge from Europe into the US. I helped launch Tropicana Casino. I helped with the Delaware RFP. I'm now mainly focusing on social, helping land-based operators develop their social strategy as an interim for real money gaming. So also looking at things like daily fantasy sports, esports, mobile on premise. So everything that sort of surrounds real money gaming and helps land-based operators develop their digital presence, so to speak.
Great. Next we have Brett
I lost my
Calapp.
voice because of this man.
I still see you have some chips left over last night from the aquarium. Next we have Brett Calapp from, he's a Chief Social Gaming Officer at Polar Interactive. So what is Polar Interactive and what's your background in this industry?
Yeah, so Polar Interactive, we have a real money gambling apps and site in New Jersey. We have social gaming, so we provide other casinos with social casino, and then we also are partners with Paula, which is a land-based casino in Temecula, California. My background in gaming specifically, I was a tech entrepreneur before that, but in gaming I was the president of a company called the Ultimate Blackjack Tour. I created subscription poker for Club WPT, which you can still play today at World Poker Tour's website. So the last panel is actually really fascinating to me to hear about subscription sweepstakes models from a legal perspective. I created a company called Rocket Frog where we provided branded games on Facebook and tournaments for prizes, and then just most recently I'm the Chief Social Gaming Officer for Paul Interactive.
Excellent. Blaine, last but not least, what is GameCo and what's your background in the industry?
Hi everyone, I'm Blaine Graboyes, the co-founder and CEO of GameCo and also the CEO of the gamer agency. GameCo was the first company in the US approved by regulators for skill-based gaming and video game gambling. We make a hardware and software platform that allows patrons to play real video games in land-based casinos for money under GLI 11 regulations. And then the gamer agency is a premier esports production company. We're based in New York. We work with brands like Microsoft and venues and casinos to help develop esports programs.
That's great. So as you can see, we have a diverse background for panelists. I call them the rock stars in the industry. So the first question, I actually wanted to throw this one to Brett. Please articulate what do you want to see in new content for both social, real money, gaming platforms, and the casino floor. And I figured I'd give each about 5 minutes or so to kind of give an overview in your opinion of that market.
So, I've been a big fan for years with tournaments and multiplayer games. I think that casino can be a very lonely place a lot of times because it's just you and the machine. And you know, there was always this theory of being in the machine zone when you're sitting on the floor, right? And you're just enamored with what's going on. But I also think, you know, there's a reason why the craps table is right in front, you know, on the casino floor, because everyone's excited and there are things happening. So when you take that to online games, especially on a mobile device, again, you're kind of by yourself and it's lonely. So how do we create content that really gives us a sense of community, gives a sense of competition, gives a sense of knowing that there's other people that I'm interacting with, whether that's, you know, taking things from other successful games outside the casino genre, so looking at clans and guilds and things like that, or how do we create a competitive environment where there's real-time interaction with other players? It's not just me and my device, but I know that there's people that are either, you know, in my local vicinity or, you know, could be, you know, anywhere in the world really, but I'm interacting with them in real time. So from a content perspective, that's one piece that I think that I'm really looking at and wanting to find developers who understand that and how to build that. I also think that how do we evolve slot products? Obviously, slot is the dominant force here when you talk about social gaming. So how do we take things like skill and bring them into slot as a derivative of that? Or also, how do we create kind of like what Gamblet would do, what you guys are doing, about how do we create kind of skill-based gambling type games? So games that are a little less intimidating than your traditional like table game. I mean, it's intimidating at the end of the day if you don't know how to play blackjack, if you don't know how to play poker. It's intimidating to sit down at a poker table with a live dealer and everyone else is around you, and it's all of a sudden your turn to act, and everyone's looking at you, and you're looking at your cards and thinking like, what would Maverick do right now? So, I think that if we can remove that by making things a little more less intimidating, creating an onboarding process with games that might be more casual, familiar, easy to play, then introduce those more difficult concepts. Like those are also games that we're looking at.
Okay, Melissa, I had the same question for yourself.
Yeah. First of all, excellent. Like I agree with the multiplayer and the tournaments and the community driven. Another way to look at this, and this is pulling my experience from real money gaming in Europe. And I don't want to go into too much detail on how I got to this, but I like games also that are two things. One is appealing to the widest audience. I don't think that casino and slot games are for everyone. I think there's a lot of issue, like a lot of people think, oh, that's taboo, or I'll never play a slot game. But I think a lot of people look at things like bingo as, well, that's not so bad. It's just bingo, even though everyone's playing slots on the side. But I just feel like people view things like that are the widest appealing, or maybe not so hardcore gambling. I also think another thing is the widest audience always for real money gaming has been sports-based games. So even though sports wagering is illegal except out of Nevada and some variant in 3 other states, if you can bring a sports element into the mix, so things like when Paula, you've launched virtual sports, which is basically a slot game, so it's a hidden slot game, but people don't view it that way. If you look at, like in the UK, if you walk into any bookmaker, and there's 10,000 bookmakers in the UK, so it's basically like your chock full of nuts or your Starbucks. 50% of the revenue, 40% of the revenue in sports wagering there is coming from virtual sports. So if we could take in things like that and develop games that appeal to the widest audience that have a softer image, I think that would be super helpful.
That's actually great insight. And last but not least, we have Blaine. But before Blaine answers his question, I sat down and I realized that not everyone in the audience may understand about skill-based games or what GameCo does. So we have a short couple slides for Blaine to go through. And then if Blaine, after the conclusion of your slides, if you can go answer that question in regards about content, it'd be great. Thank you.
So this is what our product looks like. It looks a lot like a arcade cabinet or a slot machine. It actually is a slot machine. We buy them from a slot manufacturer. This is one of our latest products. It's a Steve Aoki game that'll be launching in the coming months. It's an infinite runner game. And I'll talk a little bit quickly just about how our games work, because when I mention, oh, video game gambling or skill-based gaming, a lot of people just don't understand. So this is a real video game. In this case, it's an infinite runner. For those that are unfamiliar with the genre of games, it's sort of a casual mid-core game. You're flying on a track, and in this case, you're collecting gold records and Steve Aoki tiles. You're listening to tracks from his Dim Mak label, and it's a very sort of transcendental, mesmerizing experience. And your skill really is determining your payout. So in this game, you're collecting points, and the amount of points that you collect is equivalent to the payout that you're going to get in the game. And for GameCo, we're very focused on this idea of video games colliding with casinos and what the casino of the future is going to look like. And I'm a gamer. I've been making video games for 20 years, playing video games my whole life. And we started GameCo around this idea of creating a VIP destination for gamers. And on Tuesday, I moderated a panel specifically on this topic. And I got into the space based on my experience in esports. And in 2013, I got to send a survey to 10,000 employees of Quicken Loans. And this was the very chart that drove me into the space. And so basically, we sent it to 10,000 employees of Quicken Loans, all ages. We asked a bunch of questions, but one of the big questions that we asked was, do you gamble and do you play video games? And you can see that there's a diminishing group of traditional gamblers, and this is, again, all ages, but you can see, you know, it really peaks out in the 50s and 60s. That's what you would expect to see with the typical slot audience. And there's this huge wave of video game enthusiasts that are coming into the market and are really underserved. And so there's a lot of discussion for the casinos around millennials, but we really like to talk about gamers. And when you look at the market for social and real money, it's a lot bigger than just millennials. So if you do a quick 4-part test, over 21, top percentage of household income, do you go to casinos and do you play video games, you definitely get about 9 million millennials, but you also get about 8 million Gen X and 6 million baby boomers. So this is a massive market for social and real money casinos to appeal to the next generation of gamers. This is the first game that we launched in 2016. It was called Danger Arena. We now have 3 games that are GLI approved, 5 more coming. So just quickly how it works, it uses Tito tickets or cash. We use the existing technology. You bet anywhere from $2 to $20. In this game, you have 45 seconds to eliminate as many robots as possible. Typically, our games are anywhere from 30 to 60 seconds. We have some fast play games that are coming out that are 15. And this is a straight up video game. It uses a controller, just like your Xbox or PlayStation. There's no slot component. There is an RNG in the game, and what the RNG does is controls the maximum win for that particular game session. So this is an actual pay table from our Steve Aoki game, and it shows a few really interesting things. It shows on the left the score, how that corresponds to your payout. And one of the things that we've learned having the games on the floor is showing the odds for the game, just like the original skill games of electronic poker or blackjack, actually increases coin in and occupancy. So we have this concept at GameCo that we call radical transparency. And over time, we're sharing more and more with the audience of, here's how the game works, here's what your odds are, because these are intelligent, tech-savvy consumers, and they want to know as much as possible about the game. Another big thing for us are game genres. We want to appeal to all gamers. One of the stereotypes I love to dispel, and probably isn't a new idea for everyone here at Casual Connect, is the average gamer is 35 years old. And by allowing casinos to program their floor with everything from core to casual games, they're able to appeal to a wide audience. So this is a little bit of who's actually playing our games. So Danger Arena, first-person action game, think Call of Duty. Not surprising, the audience is 60% male under 40. Pharaoh's Secret Temple, match 3 game like Candy Crush or Bejeweled. 60% of the audience is female over 40. And over time, we're releasing a wide variety of games across core to casual. You can see some of the branded games that we're coming out with later this summer. Steve Aoki and Terminator 2. Really proud to announce Soul Calibur from Bandai Namco coming to the platform. And we actually, last week, announced our open API, which now allows any developer to develop games for land-based casinos. So if people out there are interested in getting games into land-based, we want to provide a platform for doing that. And we have some great IP that's coming to market over the next year or so as well. Mission Impossible, Star Trek, Hang 'em High, Ferris Bueller, and a lot more that we'll be announcing over time. So it's just sort of a snapshot of what we're doing in the skill-based gaming space.
Now, it might have sounded like an advertisement for GameCo, but the one thing I wanted to make sure and drive home, and it's important, and when I spoke to Blaine about this, is he's looking for content. And if you're a developer and he's looking for content, then you should reach out to Blaine, because he can kind of talk to you what the steps would be to be able to possibly bring a concept to him and whether they'd approve it and things like that, which hopefully we'll talk about later on in today's session. Normally...
Can I ask a question?
No.
Why
Go
not?
ahead.
Well, no. Can we continue to talk about? Can we just riff right into that?
Well, I wanted to say something, then you can ask a question.
Okay.
So what I want to do, and it doesn't limit to the audience either, so we actually have panelists too. I don't want to leave the questions to the end of the session, right? I want to make this interactive. If you're a developer and someone says something up here on the stage, you know what you should do? Raise your hand and say, hey, I have a quick question. And we'll finish the thought, and then we'll address your question versus waiting to the end. Because again, today's session, to be able to get, as a developer, get the knowledge from us so we can help you, be successful in this marketplace. That's the whole goal of today's session. Pick these people's brains. And go ahead, Brett. You have the first question.
So I just want to tag along to what he was saying because I have a question for you. So we have developers that come to us and say, which I always find interesting, like, I want to be on the casino floor, right? And rather than coming directly to us and saying, I want to be online or I want to be in real money in New Jersey online. So my question is, do you work with the developers to help them onboard and get certified and stuff like that? Because that's a real challenge. Like, if you want to have a box on the casino floor, there's a lot of steps that go into that. And it takes a great deal of time to get there. If you can even manage to squeeze and convince the casino that you're going to get that space on their floor, because that can already make money. So, sorry. That's my question to you, because that was really fascinating to me.
Well, excellent. Yeah, that is exactly what we're doing with the open platform. And it was part of my original vision for GameCo, was sort of the Xbox of the casino. So we take this existing slot hardware. We've built our own platform. And what our platform handles is all of the user interaction, all of the betting, all of the peripherals, all of the casino accounting, metering. We're a licensed gaming manufacturer. We're licensed in about 8 jurisdictions now, probably about 20 over the next year, including all the major jurisdictions. We bring the product to GLI, but we don't make any games at GameCo. So the 3 games we've brought to market, the 5 we have going into GLI, we work with external developers. And we work in a variety of models as well. So we do work for hire, where we find a game that we love and we'll pay the developer to port it to our platform. But increasingly what we're finding is exactly what you're saying. Developers that want to get into the land-based market, but they don't want to get licensed and regulated. They don't want to raise the millions of dollars that we do. They don't want to put the money out for hardware. They don't want to negotiate these deals with casinos. They don't want to have the long-term business that we do necessarily, where returns are happening over 5 to 7 years of the machine's lifespan. So a lot of developers on our platform, we're either sharing development costs, or increasingly we have developers that are funding 100% of their development to get the game onto our platform. We integrate it with our platform, we take it through GLI testing, we sell it into casinos, and then we pay them out on a per unit or per monthly basis. And what I love about it as a game developer and producer is they come to us with ideas which we would have never conceived of. And one of our best performing games on our platform right now is Pharaoh's Secret Temple. It was developed by an independent game studio named Pirates Gold. And it's a match 3 game with a mechanic that we just would have never conceived of. And I'm really excited about that creatively, because right now we're so early in this space of skill-based games and video game gambling. No one knows what's going to hit. We want to have a really wide portfolio of games from core to casual, and we want to have games in the market that we just never would have thought of otherwise. So absolutely, if you have folks that want to get into land-based, anybody out there wants to learn about the platform, we'd love to share what we're doing.
Now let's just talk about the evolution of the slot machine. I can almost apply it to skill-based games on the floor. Right now you're at the Liberty Bell stage, am I correct?
Yeah, I like to talk about that really openly. So in making video games, I used to study slot machines, and actually Melissa turned me onto a book last night that I ordered on Amazon about the mental model and psychographics about slot machines. They are amazingly, perfectly optimized money-making machines. And we're really open. Our machines, I don't know, maybe they're 10, 15% optimized. We have this concept I mentioned earlier about radical transparency. So I share a lot. We have some games that have done $30, $50 a day in win per unit. That's not great. We have other machines right now that are doing $250, $280 win per unit. That's awesome for us. And what's really important about it for the operator is it's new incremental revenue. Most of our customers report that they wouldn't have gambled otherwise or weren't going to play slot machines that day. But there is so much upside for the future around the optimization. And really what that comes down to is taking risks, getting data, being open to creative criticism, and trying new things to improve the performance on a month-to-month basis.
Yeah, if you think about it, Blaine, what you've essentially done is you've taken that barrier for any developer of unique content, and you've actually lowered it to a point where there's no reason they shouldn't approach you if they have a concept or an idea that they think may do well on the floor. Before I ask my first question of the panel, I didn't know if there's anybody in the audience that, before we continue on, if they had any pressing questions. Okay, first question to Melissa. You're constantly being pitched, always by a large number of different concepts around content, be it for online, real money, social, and even for the casino floor. Without mentioning the companies or violating NDAs, can you share with me what you've seen, if I can say the word, conceptually, what will be successful and what won't be, and tell us why?
Well, I sort of alluded to it earlier, right? Games, I think, that appeal to the widest audience, right? So I'm a big fan of the virtual sports. I'm a big fan of all sports-based games. I'm also a big fan of things that are just new, innovative. You know, the problem is that it's hard to get companies to innovate. And you're one of the biggest innovators out there, and that's why I'm always pitching the new stuff to you. But I think that it's hard. Like, so I took the company Leap, which is a virtual sports, and I was trying to get them a deal with a box manufacturer. And the only thing they kept saying to me was, based on the skill-based game, this one box manufacturer said, well, we're not sure if it's going to really work on the floor because you can't just go like this, right? And so, you get to a floor manufacturer or a slot floor, the person in charge of the slot floor, and it's very hard for them to take that leap of faith. So I think with social and with online, you can actually experiment a lot more with this kind of content because the barrier to switch it out is a lot faster. So to me, I'm always looking for new and creative content. Another cool new feature thing that I saw recently was Betfair just launched a slot machine in New Jersey called Early Cash Out. So it's basically like a parlay slot machine. So instead of just hitting 1, 1, 1, so you basically bet, okay, over the next 10 spins, what's the outcome going to look like on the overall spin? So it's more of like a lottery-like payout, so it could be much more interesting to the player. And then if you kind of get a little lucky early, you can cash out early. So I really do like these, experimental things that people are approaching games that they know today. So not learning new stuff, but with a different kind of twist on it.
Yeah, that's actually a great point, Melissa, because the casino operators, and I know Blaine's seen this, they try to take his technology and say, okay, well, it should make this much a day. Well, wait a minute. Where'd you come up with that number? Because skill-based games are brand new to the market. It's impossible to make that statement. So I think the first thing is educating the casino operators to skill-based game is different than a sports game from Leap versus something else, a regular slot machine. Because to your point, slot machines had hundreds of years to be optimized, right? So that's one thing, is educating the industry. But the other thing is also mentioning, and it's hard for us to sit up here, we really want new content. Trust me, if you have an idea or a concept and you say, well, I'm not sure they would like that, I'm telling you, the casino industry is eager to look for new and innovative content. And if you want to go the route of trying it out or talking to Brett for Parlor Interactive to do on the social site, to test drive it or things like that, you have opportunities for individuals up here to say, yeah, here's my concept, let's test drive it. If it does well, maybe we can go talk about the next phase, which could be the box. So there's a natural progression. You don't have to go to the floor immediately. And Melissa's point about the Leap gaming is she saw it online and she said, oh my God, this is the perfect concept for the floor, and we're just having a difficult time convincing casino operators to take that leap of faith.
I mean, I feel like I have to constantly bring in examples from Europe. Okay, so 50% of the bookmaking revenue is coming from virtual sports, or it's working here, it's working there, and so it does take a lot of work to convince people to see things in a new light.
Well, remember my point earlier, it was 15 years since we've had our last major innovation on the floor. So
and I just want to touch on something that you mentioned, Frank, because it's brutal on the floor. There's this metric, house average, and it's how much are the machines making on average. But when you really dig into it, there are very few machines on the floor that are creating the upper end of house average. And so you hear about house averages, they're $500 at a certain casino. well, great, there are a couple machines on the floor that are doing like $1,600 a day. But as we all know, to get to an average, there's a bunch that are doing $50 or $100 a day. So why would a new product be held to this idea of house average when it's generating more revenue than the lower performing machines, and at the same time, this revenue is potentially from net new gamers and is incremental? I think one of the things that I've learned, and I didn't say it, really brilliant guy from the industry mentioned it to me. He said, the machines don't make the money, the patrons make the money. The patrons are the ones bringing the money into the casino. The machines are just what are taking it. And if there are machines on the floor that are going to bring new patrons into the casino and new money into the casino, that's the absolutely most valuable thing for our industry right now. And whether that's happening online and social or real money or on the floor, getting the next generation of gamers into the casino is the most critical thing for our industry. I agree.
So I'm the chairman of a competition, a semi-annual competition called the Launchpad, that's put on by Clarion. And so there's normally like 50 submissions, and we get it down to 5, and then there's one winner. Invariably, there's always like 4 or 5 submissions of a completely new game. Like, I have the greatest thing, it's gonna be the next poker. And I'm like, I have a tough time ever picking one of these games, which is a completely new game, new deck of cards. I have a new like I've got this, it's not like your deck of cards. Like, it's new colors, new this, and I'm like, I just don't see people, and I'm not saying it can't happen, but for every one that will be successful, there will be so much train wreck, so much roadkill to get that new game adopted. I just don't think that people are that into a gambling game, which is a completely new genre, like a totally new way of learning how to do something. I think they would rather, and maybe I'm too conservative myself, but I tend to pick companies that are just tweaking something that the people already know how to do, rather than, don't give me a new deck of cards, don't give me a new set of dice. Even you brought me a new set of dice, and I'm like, no. And I just think it's a big hurdle to ask people. It's a big ask, and that's why your games, they're games that people are already familiar with, and I think that that's a lot easier for people to swallow. That's all. Especially when it comes to gambling.
So Brett, if you're in the shoes of the game developer in the audience, what content would you be creating and why?
I'm a big fan of taking, what Melissa was kind of talking about, but taking like games that we're already familiar with and trying to layer in what people are doing outside of the casino space. I think a lot of times in casino, we're always looking at casino, and everyone else borrows our mechanics to do in their other games. So why can't we look at their games and borrow some of their mechanics and what they're doing? So I can't. It's hard for me to onboard a game that's so new that nobody will know how to play, or that I have to teach my audience how to play. But if they're familiar with those skill sets and we can layer in gambling mechanics on top of it, that's super interesting, to me. And if I was building stuff, like I said earlier, I'm just a big fan of competition, tournaments, how do we play together to achieve something together. So you see a lot of like leveling based mechanics, in social casino, but every game. But in social casino, yes, I can get more levels and unlock machines. But is there a way that we can play together to go on that journey? And that journey doesn't have to be app wide, right? It can be game specific. So as a content developer, you may not be saying, I'm going to build a full blown casino or 100 slot machines. But if you build that one game and you focus on the journey within that game, then I think that's something that would be really interested in doing and looking at. So,
okay, great. Blaine, question for you. It's actually around game genres. From a core to casual, they attract different players and they actually drive, performance metrics for the casino. Can you talk about that a little?
Sure. So our goal in the long term is to bring in new gamers. So, under 40, I would say, is a really important threshold. The challenge now is most of the customers are over 40, and most of the customers are female. So what we're finding right now is that the games that perform the best are game genres that would typically appeal to that audience, like a match 3 game. And then you get into what we think of as mid-core games. We have a sports game, Nothing But Net. It's really simple to play. You press one button, you get 12 shots on basket. You don't even need to like basketball. It's really a timing and coordination game. And that's sort of, for us, a bit of a crossover. And then on the far side, we have a core game, Danger Arena. And it's really interesting for me. When we started GameCo, we thought all of our games are going to have our game controller. And we built a game controller with Suzo Hap. It looks a lot like an Xbox controller. It's simplified and really ruggedized for the casino environment. And what we found very quickly is that our controller is absolutely our best marketing tool on the casino floor. It is absolutely also our greatest weakness. And by that, what I mean is, if I'm walking through the casino floor and I see a game that is a game controller and I'm a gamer, I'm instantly intrigued. I want to go up, I want to play with it, I want to see the game. If I love Call of Duty or Counter-Strike, Danger Arena is a great game for me. On the flip side, if I don't know how to use a game controller, is a $2 to $20 bet for a 60-second or 45-second game session the best time to learn how to use it? And it's pretty amusing where you see people, they're like, they just want to try something new. They know they don't know how to do it. And because of our iPhones, people tend to think things are gyroscopic. And it has 2 joysticks, so one to walk, one to aim. And I see a lot of people, they're like this with it, trying to get a reaction, and they're shooting the walls and the ceilings. And they're having fun, but they have no idea what they're doing. They're not going to get a win. You know, they're doing it just because it's different on the floor. And so right now, when we're building our game roadmap, I would say we're aiming for 30 to 40% casual games, let's say appeal to the typical slot audience, another 30 to 40% mid-core kind of crossover, and a minority of games today for, let's say, 2017, 2018, core games for that male audience. But then looking ahead over time, I'd like to see that shift dramatically. So as esports become bigger at casinos, as we get more of the nightclub, bar, and restaurant audience onto the casino floor, as we attract more net new gamers to the casino, I'd love to see maybe 50% of our games as core games, the same games you would play on your Xbox or PlayStation today, getting those onto the floor, and then maybe half of the games being core and casual, because those core games, fighting games, action games, adventure games, even racing games, those are going to be that net new gamer that's attracting, pure incremental revenue to the casino. They never would have played a slot machine. Maybe they would have played a little bit of blackjack. But those are the customers we're looking to attract over the next 2 to 5 years.
It's interesting, a couple of the sessions in the past that I attend here earlier in the week, and I was thinking about the analogy, and I'll bring it up again, Dave & Buster's, right? So why haven't, so GameCo has a box, so you're kind of limiting the individual to be creative. They're in a box now, essentially. Do you have any advice, any of you, on let's go outside that box? Because if you walk on the casino, on the Dave & Buster's floor, there's an incredibly large amount of skill-based games that everyone is playing. So it's a hard question, and I haven't asked anybody this.
I could. Steps, though, right? You're taking baby steps right now, because that floor space is valuable. You're always, they're always moving machines around. They're always renovating, doing something, right? And so to convince them to give up a large space to do like virtual reality, that takes a lot. That takes someone who's really forward thinking to think about using that space in that way. But are we moving in that direction? I think that there's more and more innovation to be had.
Yeah, and I guess just to touch on it from our standpoint, there's a reason we chose Slotbox for our platform. It makes it really easy to implement for the casino. It's essentially plug and play from their standpoint. Their slot techs can maintain it in exactly the same way. But now we're starting to add to it. So we'll have games maybe late 2017, Jeff, definitely early 2018, with light guns and haptic feedback. And we're working on a steering wheel. We're working on a flight stick. So these will be new input devices, but still within this existing slot box. And even we're starting to design our Gen 2 cabinet, and we're looking at some really cool technology around it. Still pretty much the footprint of an existing slot machine. It just makes it so much easier for the casino to implement. And people are always asking us, well, when are you going to do virtual reality? And I would never say never, but I think it's very difficult right now to think about what would be the footprint of that game that would make sense on the floor in an environment where we're still being compared against house average. And then the regulatory side, regulators are not trying to stop new products from coming to market. I'm often talking about how supportive the regulators have been and are on our products, but I also think there are some game formats and technologies that are going to be very difficult for regulators to get their head around. And from our standpoint, if there was cashless payments, we would be supporting cashless payments. If there was a way to have iPads on the floor, we'd be running our games on that. So we're not necessarily looking to revolutionize the back-end systems. We're looking to bring new game experiences to the casino on technologies that are already available.
The data that's running through casinos. I mean, if you think about over 200 events in a hand of poker that can be analyzed, like there's so much data flowing that as soon as there's a shift to be able to say, we know what's happening in the casino. We know where you go to eat, what time you go to bed, what games you're playing, what's the ebb and flow. And so as that starts saying, oh my gosh, look at this new audience that's coming in to play these types of games, and then are now introduced to our traditional gambling games, and watching that flow of money and watching that traction, that's only going to lead to more and more onboarding and more innovation. So.
I mean, to your point about Dave & Buster's, I've often wondered why, okay, sorry, and then I've often wondered why, like, take a state like New York where there's an 80% tax rate. Why has no one set up a social casino in a land-based environment? Just give 50% of the money of whatever people spend back to the player. The player's still better off than giving 80% back to the state.
That's a good point. Well, that's actually a new possibility. That should be explored. That's a great idea.
There's an argument based on the casino side from the guys that have been running casinos for years and years. Millennials will eventually play slot machines. And that's where we're making most of our revenue today. That's where we made most of their revenue in the past. Their argument is, we'll just wait around till this age group ages out, and then they'll sit down at a slot machine at some point and start pushing buttons. How do you counter that argument?
Well, it's changed a lot in the last year. So when I started GameCo in 2013, people would say, oh, it's going to take you 10 years to get product approved. Well, it took us 1 year. And they would say exactly that argument. 20 years ago, 20, 30-somethings didn't play slots. They all aged into it. Well, there's something that's pretty radically different in the last 10 or 20 years, and that's technology. So previous generations didn't grow up playing video games. They didn't grow up with smartphones. And I think it's pretty fair to say that the pace of digital innovation outside of the casino has changed the entire world. And the idea that that's not going to affect the casino is not a very solid business case, in my opinion. And I like to think of it in a certain way, which is, you know, if you look at most jurisdictions, they've maintained floor averages by removing machines. So if you had the same number of machines on the floor in almost every jurisdiction except for a number of kind of locals and tribal jurisdiction, floor averages would have diminished considerably. And so that just points to the fact that we're kind of in this ship that's taking on a lot of water. And the question is, well, how fast are we sinking? But wouldn't the better question be, how fast are we bailing? And by bailing, I mean, how fast are we adding new incremental revenue and new players? Why wait around? We're working on a really interesting report with a researcher at UNLV. And he mentioned to me something really interesting. He said, I was at a locals casino. I think it was 5 years ago, maybe it was 10, but let's say some period of time ago, they had 6 valets on Friday night. They have 2 valets on Friday night. And they asked the valets, well, why do you only have 2 valets? Well, all of our customers died. And they know all the customers by name. They know all of their cars, and they know what happened. Well, why didn't those customers get refreshed? It's because these new younger generations, we have other things to do with our time and money. On the flip side, I love Dave & Buster's, but when I go there, I don't really feel like a VIP. I don't feel cool at Dave & Buster's.
That's because you're old.
Yeah, I guess I'm 44. I'm not a teenager. But where do I feel cool? I feel really cool when I go to a casino.
It's true.
There's this amazing experience. I love to eat at good restaurants. You know, I just love the experience at casinos. I live in Vegas now. It's really fun.
That's because you're in Vegas. Go outside of Vegas.
Well, I mean, I was in, I mean, granted, it's Hard Rock, but I was just in Tulsa. I went to Hard Rock. It was a really cool experience. And granted, there are some that don't have that level of amenity and hospitality. But there's one thing that casinos are amazing at, and that's making you feel like really special, like a high roller. And that's something we could extend to the gamer community.
I know we have another question. Do we have another question? Yes.
We talk a lot about the contents. One of the things that we find from the social casino is there's a lot of interactions between the players. But we don't see that a lot in like real money and or land-based casino. Do you see that it would come, or like how it would come, like the interactions between peoples?
I'm actually surprised about the lack of lessons that are being ported over into the real money, even in the online sector. Like I think when we launched Tropicana in New Jersey, GameSys at the time was in a top 10 social casino. As well as the #1 UK gaming operator at the time. And the thing that helped us become #1 in casino in New Jersey was they took a lesson from social and brought it over into real money, which was this jackpot community. So anytime you played within 30 minutes of whenever you wagered, if somebody won the jackpot, they won half the jackpot, and anyone who wagered in the past 30 minutes won the other half of the jackpot. And that created that feeling, oh my God, it's been 30 minutes, I gotta go back online just to make a wager, so I'm entitled to this jackpot community. And to me, I think that's the only learning lesson that real money is adopted from social, really. And there are a couple of platforms out there that are trying to make the real money online gaming experience more community with leaderboards and much more community driven. But outside of these very basic functions, I really think that not enough lessons have been learned in the real money environment from social. And I think that the real money gaming environment, a lot of them are just so afraid of alienating their core customer base by adding these social features that they're just not adopting. But I think there's a lot of room for it. If you look at new online gaming operators that have like come out of nowhere, you take a company like Kazumo, they've got this more social oriented approach. And so I do think that there's a lot more lessons to be learned from that perspective. Certainly on the land-based floor, I think that'll take a lot longer because I think regulators don't know how to get their head around it. But even in Europe, where I think it's a lot more progressive and online, not enough lessons have been learned. It's a good point.
Just to touch on that a little bit on the land-based side, I think Gamblet's done a great job with their Model G and multiplayer table game. It's 2 to 4 players. You're playing a fairly traditional game. At GameCo, we decided to launch with single-player Class 3 based on a lot of our market research and game nights, and we found, similar to what you were talking earlier about the table game effect, where noobs are new players, gamer term, newbie, are like uncomfortable sitting down at a table with more skilled gamers. And when we would run multiplayer video game nights, what we found is the table was instantly dominated by the best pro players. Sure. Now that we have a footprint, we have a better understanding of the market, we are developing both a player versus player and a tournament controller system. And what's really important for us is that it leverages our existing footprint. So instead of having a game on the floor that requires 2 players, we're able to have our existing footprint of single-player games on the floor, but if an operator or users decide that they want to play in a multiplayer environment, they can do that on the existing hardware that's already implemented. So that flexibility for us is what's important. And I would say from a regulator standpoint, we've actually had a lot of success. My biggest fear in doing multiplayer was that they would be afraid of collusion. And what the operators and the regulators said to us is like, we got that. We've been managing collusion forever. On our games, the max bet's $20. And another thing that we've heard is, well, if people want to launder money or collude over $20 bets, I'm like, they have better things they could be doing than doing it $20 at a time.
Any other, those are great questions. Thank you. You know, I hate giving this analogy, but again, I'm going back to the Dave & Buster's and seeing that floor transform. Because I am older now, I didn't find anything appealing on that floor. But 10 years ago, the video games and pinball machines, I loved it. So they made the transformation. Their floor is packed now. They're making a lot of money. If you look at Blockbuster, right? They did not evolve. What does Netflix do? They went online. Content is king for them, right? They evolved. They evolved with technology. You can stream now on your phone. You can do all these different things. And it makes me wonder, the casino of the future, if they don't change or evolve the floor, what's going to happen? Will it become like a Blockbuster or not as bad? You know, anybody has an opinion on that?
So it was sort of relevant to that, you know, in terms of evolution of content. Sure. I feel like with social, there's so many people playing social casino. And I feel like the content developers that make their content available, I mean, and I'm talking about slot floor manufacturing content. I'm talking about the IGTs and the side games, the Ainsworth and the Konamis. And I feel like those that make their content available to the social gamer will be the ones who win in the long run. And I feel that there are a couple of really progressive slot floor manufacturing companies that are being that are licensing their content out to third-party companies on reasonable terms, and then there's some that aren't. And I feel like that in the long run, I have to believe that those that are offering their content and viewing the social as a way to support their land-based content will be the ultimate winners in the long run. Maybe not this replacement cycle, maybe not the next, but there's so many social casino players that come back onto the floor asking for that content that they played in their social casino. So I do feel like either the land-based manufacturers have to open it up on reasonable terms, or they will lose out to those box manufacturers that are doing it.
That's a great point, Melissa.
Well, and content that's on your device and on the floor at the same time. So, I mean, look, when you're not sitting at a table or sitting at a machine on the casino floor, what are you doing? You're eating, you're at the pool, you're at the bar, you're socializing. Well, you're also playing a game, most likely. You're doing something on your mobile device. I mean, that's the biggest change, right? Is when my mom just got a cell phone, so she sends me or a smartphone. She sends me emojis all day. And so, but when she was growing up, she didn't have that technology, and so her time is spent on other things, and that's the distraction that people have, right? And so and that's why we have to adapt. So when you're not on the casino floor, you have to be playing something, and so why not be playing games that are relative to that casino or helping drive incremental revenue, whether that's mobile on premise or trying to do social through virtual currency or skill-based games.
You know, actually, I think, are we almost out of time? Or do we have any, before we continue on, because we can talk about this stuff for hours. We're passionate about it. We love it. But I wanted to go to the audience first. Are there any other questions out there?
We got about 3 minutes.
3 minutes? Okay.
Well, just to jump off what Brett was sharing, and, you know, this idea of content, well, the gaming floor is content, but there's all this other content at the casino, right? Nightclub, bar, restaurant, entertainment. So there's this famous chart in Nevada, we call it the X chart. 1999 was the last year that gaming revenue outpaced non-gaming revenue. And it's really interesting because it correlates very closely. It was about 5 years before that there was the expansion of tribal gaming, and we went from, you know, a handful of gaming jurisdictions to 20-some and then 30-some. And it's really interesting how it sort of sucked the air, if you will, or the money out of the Vegas Strip being purely about gaming. But what I think is really interesting about the opportunity over the next 5 or 10 years is imagine the industry whereby they can keep all of that non-gaming revenue that they've developed, but now start to bump up the gaming revenue, and what that'll mean for the profitability of the operators. You know, this is a very tax-driven industry, the benefits for each of the jurisdictions. There's such an amazing opportunity right now in the industry over the next 3 to 5 years to keep that content of the non-gaming revenue, but also bulk up on the content and the revenue around the gaming side of the business.
You know, if you look at the stage right now, we probably have collectively in excess of over 100 years of experience in the industry. So at the end of the session, if you want to come up to us or introduce yourself, please do that. But again, you guys have been great. Thank you so much. I actually learned a lot today's session as well, and I'm hoping you and the audience learned as well. Thank you.